Wonderful. I think we'll get started there. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Rachael Rofe. I'm head of the Australian Philanthropic Services Foundation, and I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm on the land of the Gadigal people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The First Nations people of our lands have an enduring connection, not just to the land, but to their rich history and culture of storytelling. And today's story is all about giving. If you're looking for a smart way to give, one that's flexible, tax effective and designed to grow your impact over time, then this session is for you. I'm joined today by my colleague, Kate Stone. I'm looking over at her in another room. Hi, Kate, who's the head of Philanthropic Giving at APS. And together, we're going to walk you through the benefits of structured giving. So we're going to unpack what structured giving is, who it's for, the main options, and how APS can support you, whichever option is right for you. Thank you to those who have submitted questions ahead of the webinar, and for those who have not, feel free to submit questions as we go today. If we have time at the end of the session, we'll try and answer those questions, and anything that we don't get to, we will follow up with you directly after the webinar. Okay. So I want to start, first of all, with a bit of a genesis story, the moment it began for one of our donors. And he had just had a liquidity event, not billionaire level money, but enough that he wanted to do something he'd always hoped to be able to do, which is to give some money to the community. But he didn't just want to give it away all at once. What he really wanted was that most elusive of things, which is time. Time to figure out which causes matter to him, time to think and involve his family and work out what causes mattered to them, and time to give well into the future. But he also had a conflicting financial priority, which is he had a reasonably large tax bill that he wanted to deal with. And his advisors suggested what we now know as ancillary funds, a giving structure that gives you an immediate tax deduction, but the flexibility to decide where the money goes to charity later. But according to his lawyer, the setup was going to be very complicated, and even worse, it is going to be something very expensive. Surely, he thought, giving shouldn't be this hard. The donor thought that there was a real opportunity here to have an organisation that would remove the friction, the cost and the complexity of setting up and administering these structures. And it would unlock so much more giving across Australia if this organisation existed. And being the very practical guy that he is, he didn't just sit on the idea, he built it. And that donor was Chris Cuff, and the organisation that he founded is Australian Philanthropic Services. And today, we set up around 1 in 3 private ancillary funds established in Australia every year. We run the fastest growing and soon to be largest public ancillary fund, the APS Foundation, and we support over 1,000 clients give well to the causes that they care about. And I share this story for a few reasons. The first is I think it's a great overview of why APS exists as a charity, which is to make structured giving easier and more accessible and also more impactful. But more than that, I think a lot of people who might not identify themselves as a philanthropist will see themselves in Chris's predicament, where an ancillary fund might make sense. You do not need to be a billionaire. That is one takeaway I'd like everyone to walk away with today. You don't need a private jet. You just need the intent to give at least $40,000 and the right structure to support that. And so, Kate, I might just ask you to move on to the next slide here, which just covers what are some of the motivations, like Chris had, that gets people to set up an ancillary fund. Often people may have had a financial windfall like Chris. Maybe you've sold a business, an investment property, or you've received an inheritance. You want to give to charity, but you also want to be thoughtful and perhaps a little bit more strategic about it. Others set it up as part of their tax planning. You might be facing a tax bill that may have gone hand in hand with that liquidity event, and you would much prefer to give to causes that matter to you rather than just hand it all over to the ATO. The upfront tax deduction helps now, and you can take your time deciding where the money goes to the community later and over time. It's also very good for pre-retirees who might want to pre-fund their giving for retirement. So they bring forward all those future years of charitable giving that they would have undertaken anyway, but aggregate it up into one big lump sum so that they can claim a tax deduction while they still have assessable income, and then enjoy giving throughout their retirement years. And for an increasing number of people, it's also about legacy. You might want to involve the kids, have values-based conversations about giving and pass on to them more than just wealth. You want to pass on a sense of purpose and a sense of impact. And for some with or without kids, it can simply be about making sure that their giving continues, or for some people that it starts beyond their lifetime. A giving structure, what we call an ancillary fund, supports all of those goals. So whether it's just one that resonates with you or the full set. So I think perhaps let's start with exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about giving structures. And by giving structures, what we really mean here is ancillary funds. So you can think about your ancillary fund kind of like your giving account. Let's say you put in $100,000 into your fund, and from that moment, that $100,000 is set aside and ring-fenced for charity. You can't take it back, you've locked it in for giving, but you don't have to rush to decide where that money goes. You have time to distribute it gradually to charity. And when you make that contribution into your fund, you get a tax deduction for the full amount that you've put in. So if you put in $100,000, you immediately receive a $100,000 tax deduction. You can claim that tax deduction all in one go, or you can spread it over a period of up to 5 years. Now, that tax deduction is very handy if you have had a liquidity event, like the sale of an asset or other spike in your income. And that ability to roll over the tax deduction is really handy if your tax bill ends up being a little bit lower than you expected. You can just roll over any unused portion of that tax deduction into the next financial year, in fact, up to 5 financial years, or when the full tax deduction is exhausted, whichever happens first. Actually, I had a great question before the seminar, webinar, which I'll just mention briefly now. I want to make the point that the tax deduction that you get is for the money that you put in to your fund. You do not get a tax deduction for the money that goes out, because once you've put it into the fund, it's no longer your money. It's held there on trust for the benefit of the community. So from your own personal tax perspective, the tax event happens once. You get your deduction when you put the money in, not when it goes out. And so once that money is in, you then need to make sure, or it is then invested, and because your fund is charitable, those investment returns are completely tax-free, which means you're potentially growing the amount you have to give, all the while you're thinking through who you want to support. So that is a pretty powerful setup. You get the immediate tax benefit, you can grow your giving pool over time, and you get to support the causes that matter to you when the time is right. So you can think about that in comparison to giving directly. So when you give directly to a charity, again, let's say it's that $100,000, that money goes straight out the door, the charity gets it, you get the tax deduction, and the money's been given. It's done. But if you put the $100,000 into an ancillary fund instead, it still goes to charity, but not yet. You still get the tax deduction right away, but the money stays in your giving account while you decide which charities you want to support. So the difference there really is around timing and flexibility. Giving directly is immediate. Giving through an ancillary fund gives you the space to think it through, to grow your giving pool, and to plan your philanthropy with a little bit more strategy around it. So really then it's all about matching the right tool for your intent. I would say if you know exactly which charity you want to support today, direct giving is great. But if you want to be more deliberate, maybe involve your family or support causes over time An ancillary fund gives you that extra structure and flexibility. Okay, so once the money is in there, that's where the real fun bit begins. Choosing the charities that you want to support. So each year, you are required to give away a small portion of your fund to charity, and the exact amount that you need to give away depends on the type of ancillary you have, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But it's usually between 4 to 5% of the fund's balance as at 30 June the year before. So the minimum amount that you need to give away. You can give away more than that if you want to, and a lot of our clients do just that. So, for example, if your fund has $100,000 in it or had $100,000 in it at 30 June 2024, you need to give at least $4,000 to $5,000 to charity by 30 June 2025. And that is a really good requirement. That makes sure that money is actually regularly flowing to charities doing meaningful work in the community. There is a requirement around who you can support, so you can't just give it to anyone. It has to go to a charity with what we call deductible gift recipient item 1 status. We call DGR item 1. Don't worry too much about that. There are over 20,000 of those registered in Australia, so you certainly won't be short on choice. In fact, for many people, the real challenge is actually narrowing it down amongst that huge pool of eligible charities. And that's actually where Kate's team at APS is really valuable, that they work closely with donors to help identify causes that matter to them, and then the charities making the greatest impact in those causal areas. So what about the rest? You've got your money in, you're thinking about who you want to support, you're giving away 4 to 5%. What happens to the rest of the money that you don't give away straight away? Well, it doesn't just sit there. While you take the time to think about which charities you want to support, the remaining balance of your fund is invested. And as I mentioned earlier, those investment returns are tax-free. So that means the money that you put into your fund is still working for the community, growing, and hopefully growing your future giving potential while you're planning your next gift or gifts from the fund. And that is a real unique feature of ancillary funds. You're giving, but you're also growing your future capacity to do so. That's why we also always talk about giving via ancillary funds as a give and grow method. How those investments are managed depends on the type of ancillary fund that you choose, which I think then brings us to a nice segue into the 2 types of ancillary funds and how they differ. So you'll see there, we've set out 2 types of ancillary funds in Australia, and which one suits you will largely depend on how much responsibility you want for managing the structure and also how much you want to commit to the community. So the first type is a private ancillary fund, or what we call a PAF for short. And they will suit those with at least $1.5 million to contribute to the fund, and who want full control over all operations of the fund, especially how it is invested. So they are ideal for individuals, families, or corporates who want their own dedicated structure and are willing to take on the governance and investment responsibilities that come with it. If I was to draw an analogy, I would say it's kind of like your self-managed super fund of philanthropy. The other type of ancillary fund is a public ancillary fund like the APS Foundation. And that's ideal if you want a simpler option and also at a lower entry point. So you can set up a sub-fund, or what we call a giving fund, within a public ancillary fund like the APS Foundation. And for the APS Foundation, you can set one up with a donation from $40,000. So a much lower entry point to structured giving than, say, compared to a PAF. And because you're joining an existing structure, there's a trustee of it that takes care of everything, the admin, the compliance, the reporting, and the investments. So that means you can really focus on the best bit, which is the giving. So again, to draw on that superannuation analogy, I'd say if your PAF is like your self-managed super fund of philanthropy, the APS Foundation is like your industry fund. All you need to do is let the trustee know where you'd like to make a gift, who it's for, how much, and who it's supporting, and they will handle the rest. So we have there two types of ancillary funds, private and the APS Foundation, our public. And they are like siblings. They share many of those similarities. So you get a tax deduction, full and immediate, for the amount that you contribute to the fund, which you can claim in full in the year in which you contribute it, or spread that tax deduction over a period of up to 5 years. You have the flexibility to distribute the funds to DGR1 charities over time. But like most siblings, they also have their differences, mainly around the level of responsibility you want to take on and how much you're starting with. So let's take a look at that comparison in the next slide. And we'll just make the point, we support both private ancillary funds and giving funds in our public ancillary fund in the APS Foundation, because both are excellent structures for giving, and especially for long-term giving. The right option is really just going to depend on your goals, your level of involvement, and the resources that you'd like to commit. And that is where we start there with our entry point. So a PAF is typically suited to larger commitments, usually of around 1.5 million or more is when you're going to start getting some of those economies of scale of operating your own structure. A giving fund, as we said earlier, starts from a donation of $40,000. Now, some donors are ready to make a major commitment up front. They're ready to go. Others want to start smaller and build over time. We work with donors across the whole spectrum. Some people often start with a giving fund, but as their giving grows or their contributions into it grow, they might decide that they actually want their own private ancillary fund. And they can, in fact, transfer, or what we call port, into their own private ancillary fund in future. And we help many people do that pretty seamlessly. So you can start small, keep things easy, and then scale up when the time is right for you. The second element there, which is not neatly set out in that table, but I will just speak to it because it is often one of the key factors that helps donors decide between which structure is right for them, aside from the quantum of the amount that they have to contribute. And that is the governance, compliance, and administrative responsibility for the fund. So with the PAF, it requires its own trustee, and you can take on the role of director of the trustee company, and you'll need at least one or two, usually two other people to join you as co-directors to meet the governance requirements. And as a director of the trustee, you are ultimately responsible for all operations of the fund. Of course, you can have a great administrator like APS supporting you with all of those requirements and meeting your obligations as a director of the trustee of the PAF. For the APS Foundation, there is a trustee that manages everything for you. Governance, compliance are handled by the trustee. Investments are professionally managed by the trustee. So it really is more just focused on the giving, not necessarily the responsibility for managing the structure. And at APS, I'd say we see some donors who really enjoy being involved in every aspect, from investments to governance. They may like to get their kids involved. They like the discipline of coming together as a board to make structured decisions around the PAF, around its investments. Others prefer not to take on that responsibility, so they can just focus on the giving. Either model works. It really just depends on your preference. I would say that if investment control is important to you, a private fund is going to give you that. If you prefer not to be involved, the public option is going to give you an extremely well-managed professional solution. The next consideration is set-up time. So a PAF, you're going to need about 4 to 6 weeks to get it set up, whereas a giving fund in the APS Foundation can be set up in a day. Private funds take time to set up because they're custom built. You're creating an entirely new trust structure, which requires registration with the ATO and the ACNC. So it is a more involved process and you need time. And of course, APS can very easily support you with that process. But it is not something that you can rush through in the final days of June. In fact, if you're hoping to establish a PAF before 30 June this year, the window has likely already closed for you. Public funds, on the other hand, like the APS Foundation, are already up and running. The structure already exists. You're simply opening up your own giving fund within that existing structure. So it's quick, and it is ideal if you're looking to make a contribution and secure a tax deduction before financial year end. It is not uncommon for people to contact us on 30 June and get it set up on the very last day of the end of financial year. Although I'd expect everyone here is far more organised and will be in that situation. The next comparison is on fees. So with the private ancillary fund, the fees often depend on how you structure it. Obviously, if you get a good administrator like APS to manage your compliance and reporting, those costs are outlined separately. You'll also need to factor in establishment costs, an annual audit fee. And if you want to engage professional investment management, you're going to need to factor that in as a cost too. So that's why we generally say you'll need at least $1.5 million to make the operational costs make sense and achieve that right economies of scale with a private ancillary fund. For a giving fund, no establishment fee. It's a fee of 1.025% plus an investment management fee, which is usually around 0.34, and that's deducted monthly from the balance of your fund. So that covers everything: your administration, compliance, investment management, and giving support. There's also a difference in minimum distribution. So with the PAF, you need to give away 5% of the prior year's 30 June balance, whereas with a giving fund, it is 4%. There's also some limitations on who can contribute into an ancillary fund. So with the private ancillary fund, there's some rules about being related to the founder of that private ancillary fund, whereas with a giving fund, any person or entity, any member of the public can make a contribution into your giving fund and get a tax deduction for it. Now, just because we are so close to 30 June, I do want to spend just a little bit of extra time speaking specifically to the APS Foundation, because I know for many of you here today, you're looking to get started this financial year, and the window for a PAF has likely closed. So the APS Foundation has enjoyed such a successful trajectory to date. It is the fastest growing public ancillary fund in Australia, and we will expect by 1 July it will be the largest. It has gifted more money to charity than any other public ancillary fund, so it is the most generous, and our investment returns are the strongest amongst its peer group. So a really strong offering, incredibly popular, and the reason why, aside from being a great professionally managed solution in the market, it also suits so many people who want to give well. The people tend to be time poor. They just want to focus on the giving, so they're not looking to manage a structure. They want the simplicity so they can concentrate purely on the causes that they want to support. It supports those who really want top-tier investment expertise without the high fees that is usually associated with having someone like a Chris Cuff or a David Wright, our portfolio managers, taking care of that money. And because the size of the APS Foundation is so large, donors also benefit from getting access to institutional-grade investment management and offerings. Often those they may not be able to get if they even had their own private ancillary fund. It also suits those who are thinking about the next generation. You might want your children or your grandchildren to continue giving, and with the APS handling all of the administration, they can inherit a structure that's simple, it's really simple and not necessarily overwhelming for them. So there's no paperwork or setup stress. We do it all. You get your own named fund, you get regular reports, you get donor support, investment oversight, and you can make gifts at any time and get help with that from Kate's expert team. So let's just take a little closer look at how it works from opening your own giving fund through to making it your first gift. So the first thing you're going to need to do is think about what you want to name your fund. This is very personal. It could reflect your family, it could reflect your values, or simply something that is very meaningful to you. I think one of my favourite fund names is the Be a Good Human Fund. You can choose to be anonymous if you want to. We'll ask you to name your fund so we can identify you. But when we are paying gifts out to charity from the balance of your fund, we don't have to tell the charity the name of your fund if you do want to be anonymous. On the flip side, we can link you very closely to the gift and let the charity know it was your fund who motivated that gift, and indeed you personally as well. You need to make your donation to set your fund up, so you can establish it with that minimum tax-deductible donation of $40,000, which is then allocated to the balance of your giving fund. And then you choose between two investment options for the investment of your balance. So you can choose the general portfolio, which is very well diversified across the full investment spectrum, and that one is managed by our founder and portfolio manager, Chris Cuff. And then we have our focus portfolio, which is managed by David Wright and has a strong focus on achieving the returns, but with a particular focus on responsible investing. And those investment returns, again, they're tax-free, credited to the balance of your giving fund monthly. You can then access your fund online. So once your donation is received, your fund is up and running, usually within a day. You're going to receive your login details to your own secure online portal where you can track donations, your investment returns, make gifts all in real time, everything that you need to manage your giving from your fund. So it's very convenient. It's also very transparent. Then you need to recommend gifts when you're ready. 4% minimum of the balance every year. No particular rush to decide. It's on your time frame as long as you get that 4% distributed. And if it looks like you're having a hard time meeting that minimum distribution, Kate's team will be in touch to make sure that we can offer you some support. So we pay gifts throughout the course of the year. We're very proud to say that we do that very efficiently, particularly in times of crisis. It's not uncommon to see us have funds deployed to eligible charities the very next day, which is very important when there is a crisis response. So you can recommend your gifts to eligible charities via your online portal at any time. Give to multiple charities, shift your focus on it over time, involve your family if you want to, entirely up to you. We then handle the rest. We take care of all the compliance, the administration, the reporting. You'll get updates on your online portal so you can see your balance, you can see your activity, you get very simple, clear reports. So again, you are just focusing on the giving. And then the final bit, the final step is often around building a legacy. So you can continue to add to your giving fund over time. But you can also think forward that if you're no longer around to recommend gifts from the balance of your fund, you can nominate successors who will step forward for you in the event of death or incapacity. They can become the giving fund holders and nominate gifts from your fund. We do have many people who are not survived by someone that they want to entrust their fund, and that is when the APS Foundation trustee can support your giving plans beyond your lifetime. Legacy planning is a huge focus of our work and something we support so many of our clients with. It is a very powerful and meaning way to extend your impact beyond your lifetime. And we are going to be running a dedicated webinar on this soon. It is such a rich topic. It definitely dedicates its own session. So please stay tuned for that one. And before I hand over to Kate, I just want to give a very quick example of a donor who set up a fund 10 years ago to just give you a sense of what that looks like in terms of numbers. So if we had a giving fund that was set up 10 years ago with $100,000, as of now, April, we're working at monthly in arrears here, they have given away almost $50,000 to charity, but their balance is almost at $150,000. So in that 10 years, they've given away 50% of their original contribution to the fund, but they've grown their fund by almost 50% as well for the community. And I think the power of the Give and Grow model is really on display there, boosted by those tax-free investment returns. So that's all about, setting it up and making sure that you're choosing the right type of structure for you. The real fun comes from the giving. And often people will say to me, I don't know where to begin. And that is where Kate's team offer so much value to our clients. So I will hand over to Kate at that point so she can share how she supports our clients. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, I often say that I get to do the fun stuff when it comes to giving. And I think one of the questions, as Rachel says, is, how can APS and how does the team support you when you're trying to make giving decisions? Because for some of our clients, they'll come in, they'll have charities that they've donated to in the past. They'll have connections, they'll have causes that they already care about. And that's fantastic. They know exactly who to nominate for their gifts. They know exactly which charities they want the money to go to. And sometimes I don't even need to speak to them. But for other clients, sometimes it can just feel a bit overwhelming. You want to make sure that you're having an impact. There are so many worthy causes out there and so many fabulous charities. How do you narrow it down? And how do you think about actually what am I going to do with the money that I have available to the community? So that's when my team comes into play. And I guess there are so many ways we can help you, but we tend to think about them in 3 buckets. So the first is a strategic bucket. You may not start with a big strategy, but you might want to have a think about actually, how do I go from the 28,000 charities that they are and the number of causes that exist to where we're going to focus and where we want to see an impact and the things and the causes that matter to us. So my team can have a conversation with you. We have a workbook that helps you sort of go through some of the key questions that you might want to consider. We can help you understand and investigate some of the causes that are out there and connect you with some of those charities that you may be interested in supporting. Those conversations happen all the time. So sometimes they happen when you set up a structure. Sometimes they happen after you've been giving for a couple of years and you're sort of thinking, well, how's this all going? What impact are we making? Are we going in the direction that we want to? And often there are key events. So things like engaging, children and grandchildren in the process of giving can trigger the desire to have a family conversation and to have a team member from APS come in and help with those family conversations. We'll also have conversations with you around, how is it all working? Are we actually achieving the impact we want to have? Is that actually what's driving our giving, and how connected are we feeling? So all of those kind of strategic conversations and connection points with the APS team and the experts here who spend kind of all of our time talking to charities and understanding sectors and causes is available for you. If you don't necessarily want to speak to us, that's okay as well. We have a whole lot of resources that are available through your portal and on our website and by talking to one of your advisors. So we regularly produce insight papers into particular causes. We've had recent ones on things like mental health, homelessness, education, environment and climate change. We produce toolkits. So how do I actually ask, what questions should I be asking a charity if I'm thinking about giving to them? How do I actually understand a charity's financial statements and what does it mean? How do I recognize an inverted commas impactful charity from a charity that might not be having the impact I'm looking for? And then we also have regular newsletters, events and webinars where you can connect either with the APS team or with other givers in the APS community. And it's a great way to engage and understand what are other people doing, what's working, what are the kind of topics and trends, and what are people thinking about when it comes to giving. And then there's the really practical side of things, the things that happen particularly now, just as we come up in the lead to the end of financial year. We can give you a list of charities. We have a lot of charities sort of sitting on our database in our networks and connected to them. If people would like to come to us and say, I'm interested in supporting a homeless shelter in my local community, who do you know that is doing some work? We can share that kind of level of charity with you. And if you'd like us to connect you with the charities, we can do that. If you'd like to stay anonymous, you can do that as well. We can sort of share the information that we have with you, and you can make decisions around where you actually want to give and who you want to support. We'll help you with the due diligence. We'll connect you with other people. Sometimes that's great. And, we'll talk about it in a minute. It can be really good, particularly for next generation givers who are looking for other people who are, in families that are doing giving. It can also really be good if you're looking for people to co-fund with. Sometimes bringing your funds together and being able to pool amounts means that you can feel a greater kind of connection and impact in the causes and the charities that you care about. If you get to a space where actually you want to be really, really hands-off, we can actually manage your giving on your behalf. And that's something that we have some clients who like us to do. Most clients, to be fair, love actually engaging and being responsible and being kind of in control of their giving and the connections and the relationships with charities. So that's just a brief overview, I think, of some of the ways that the team can help you. You know, if you remember anything, I guess think we can help you with strategic, informative, or tactical kind of support and advice as you go along your giving journey. And it doesn't have to be all up front. It can be at whatever time it suits you, wherever you are, and whenever you need that support, either ongoing or in and out. We thought what we'd do is share kind of some of the questions we get often is, well, what do other people do? How are other people thinking about their giving? How are other people connecting? So we were going to share some stories and some insights from some of our existing clients and some of the sort of trends that we see in terms of the way that people are approaching giving. And I think, you know, there's lots of different areas, but the 4 key areas that come up consistently for us around how do people connect and engage their family? How do we actually connect with charities? How do I understand my impact? And, you know, I think most importantly, actually the joy that giving brings to you and to your family and to the community. So we're going to quickly chat through each of those. In terms of family, I think one of the things that our clients often come to us is how do we actually involve and engage the next generation? And sometimes people start with causes, you know, what causes are we all going to support and what do we each care about? And how do we actually bring that into our giving? And what we've found works really, really well is not necessarily to think about the causes or the types of charities that you want to support, but to actually create connection around values. So we'll have conversations with clients where we actually think about what are the values, not just of the family, but actually what are the values of the giving structure that we want to establish that are going to help us make decisions. And Jocelyn is a fabulous example of a family that has done just that. So Jocelyn is actually a director, along with her brother and sister, of a private ancillary funder path that her parents set up. And so they've got 5 people in the mix trying to make decisions about, you know, where the money that they are giving out to community goes. And I don't know about your family, but if I think about my family, if there's 5 of us, even though we're connected and even though we share a lot of things, we have very different perspectives on what matters. And I think Jocelyn's family is an exact example of that. They have different members of the family care about things like environment. You know, Jocelyn, you can see the picture there. She's really heavily engaged and she actually works in outdoor education and in the environmental space. But other members of the family care about things like parental responsibilities, education, mental health. So they have a really wide range of things that they care about and causes that they want to support. And they were really struggling with how they can manage to support all of these different areas through one structure and feel like they're actually making an impact. So we did a values session with them, and it was a fabulous session. They all actually really engaged and really enjoyed it. But more importantly, what it did was it allowed them to create a set of shared values that they then use as a decision-making framework for their particular giving. So some of the things that they did were look at the crossover. So, for example, they're now funding an organisation called the Margaret River Nature Conservancy, and they chose that not just because of the environmental lens, which sort of speaks to what Jocelyn cares about, but actually because that charity was able to show really, really thoughtful use of spending of funds and really, really strong leadership. And both of those were things that came out of the values conversation that all of the directors agreed they really wanted to look for in any organisation they supported. And then they're also supporting a kind of slightly different organisation called Human Nature Adventure Therapy, which is really looking at the crossover between the outdoors, again, speaking to Jocelyn's particular interest, but also supporting youth mental health, which spoke to her brother and sister's passions, if you like. So having that values sort of lens sitting over their giving has been really, really valuable for them in terms of how they approach their giving and how they feel like they can connect what are sometimes quite disparate cause areas or charities. And the other question we get is, well, actually, isn't everybody just really different? And what do the next generation, you know, in inverted commas, next generation people actually care about? So every family is different and every person is different, but I think there are some trends that we see in terms of the way, people from younger generations think about giving. And I think the importance of values flows through into this as well. So younger people tend to be even more values centered in terms of their giving, but actually in terms of everything that they do in their life. They're making decisions based on their values. So they're using their purchasing power. They're working for companies that align with their values, but they're also thinking about values driving their giving, which means they aren't just thinking about actually the money that's going out. They're thinking about all of their capital. They're thinking about their investments. They're thinking about actually how do we make the biggest impact with all of our resources. And that's one kind of key change that we see. And then that sort of flows through to, well, actually, what are the causes that we care about? And obviously, again, you don't want to stereotype a huge diversity of people, but some of the things that are coming through more and more often are areas like mental health, climate change in the environment, identity, and diversity. So some of those kind of causes are becoming more and more important and linked in with giving. And the other thing is that they're not just looking at the change that they want to make being, how do we support people when they have a problem? They're looking to change the systems. They really want to make sure that actually we can work with our philanthropic and our giving to try and stop all of these issues that we're seeing in society and to have a change at the root cause rather than just supporting people once they're experiencing a challenge. And they're not going to do it alone. So collaboration and connection is really important. I think that's where, we're really lucky within APS, having sort of over 1,000 clients. We have a fabulous community of givers, and being able to connect with each other and understand and learn and potentially co-fund with each other is a great way to do that and to engage people. And the other thing about connecting with family is that the motivations that are, I guess, driving the giving are not necessarily going to align with, the founders as individuals. So it feels like a really simple thing, doesn't it? I've set up a giving structure. I now want my kids to get involved. And you say, hey, let's go, come and tell me what you care about, and we're going to go away and give money. Sounds like everybody should say yes, but actually that doesn't always happen. And it's not always as easy as sort of setting up a structure and inviting them to join. We really encourage our clients to think about the motivations of the whole family and each individual within that. And I think that this little diagram is one that sort of points to key areas that come into play when you're thinking about how to engage multiple people and multiple generations in giving. So the first thing is, personalization. People don't always necessarily want to give in the same way that their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation give, even if it's having a fantastic impact and even if it's been really successful. They want something that's about them, that reflects who they are and that reflects their core values and their core interests. So being able to align that and being able to bring that into the family sort of giving structure is really important. The other thing that matters a lot is belonging. Feeling like actually I am not alone here. It can be a little bit isolating to be part of a family who is philanthropic, who is giving. So being able to connect younger people to others who are doing the same thing can be really valuable. And that can be individual connections through the APS community. It can also be connections in with groups of young philanthropists. Example, there's lots of different examples, but Nexus is one of the kind of groups of young givers who are getting together so that they feel like they're connected and they can talk about and understand issues from their perspective. The other really, really critical thing and really beneficial thing is, if you do one thing and you can do it, is experiential learning. We all know that we get connected and we understand things better when we've actually had an experience of them. And there are lots of charities out there who have programs that allow you to come in and to see the work and experience and contribute it. There's organisations like Orange Sky Laundry or Women's Community Shelters that really offer opportunities for you to come in and to participate and to actually create that connection. And those connections that you can create for the younger generation are something that's going to bring giving into their lives and continue it into the future. So when we think about, okay, we've got the family involved, we're all engaged, we know the areas that we want to support and we know how we want to connect with each other and with other givers, how do we work out, how to connect with charities and what's important? Obviously, we talked about the fact that the team at APS can help you do that. We can connect you with causes and with charities that you care about. But there's more to giving, and there can be more to giving if you choose it, than simply giving away the money. So I wanted to give you an example of what's called the 5 T's of giving. These are some of the other ways that you can look to make a contribution outside the capital that you're looking to deploy through your giving fund or your private ancillary fund. And the first is time. What can you offer? Do you have time to volunteer with a charity? Perhaps you have a talent, so you might want to be able to sit on an advisory board or the main board of a charity and help them grow their particular impact. The treasure that you give is obviously the financial resources, but it could be goods or services in kind that you're able to provide to your particular charity partners. And then the last 2 are things that can actually have an outsized impact over and above the kind of financial and resources that you're able to provide. So ties are, who do you know that can potentially support the charity? Who can you bring on board? Who might have skills or experience or knowledge or resources that they can provide to the charities that you're supporting? And then testimony. Are you willing to speak about the fact that you really do support and engage and believe in the work of those particular charities? It's one of the critical things. We all know that we're much more likely to engage with any kind of goods or services if we get a recommendation from someone we know and trust. So if you can be that someone for that charity, the impact that you have will grow significantly. And Mangala is a fabulous example of one of our clients who has done just that. When he originally set up his structure, and he originally sort of set up a private ancillary fund and has actually ported into the APS Foundation, but he set it up with the goal of being able to get his profits from his business into a foundation and give that out of the community. And he was really hands-off. He kind of, in his words, he made the money and then he kind of got out of the way. Over time, he's actually grown his engagement with the charities and the causes that he cares about. So he's become involved as a mentor for refugees who are studying business. He helps, he runs a small business himself, and he actually really values his ability to become a mentor to other refugees who are looking at studying small businesses and establishing small businesses. He connects in with his local charities, and he loves being able to kind of have coffee with the CEO and talk to them about the challenges that they have. He's actually also started talking in small business forums and networking events and opportunities about the giving that he's doing and encouraging other people to give. He's been able to bring in experts for particular charities. He works in kind of payment systems, so he's been able to bring in experts to help charities improve their systems and processes and IT infrastructure, which isn't necessarily a financial donation, but actually has a huge impact on their ability to operate well and to deliver the programs that they're doing. He's a member of Pledge 1% now, and he talks really regularly. And I think, if you speak to him, he'll tell you he feels uncomfortable still talking about it, but actually he knows that the impact that he's having by talking about it, by encouraging other people to give, is significantly greater than just the financial impact that he has by making the donations to the charity partners. So it's a really great example of, a sort of slowly journey where he's now using all of his 5 T's in terms of having an impact. So then we use the word impact a lot, and it's obviously a central part of the giving story. You want to be able to support charities, and you want to feel like your donations and the money that you're contributing to community is actually having a real impact. So there's lots of ways you can look at to understand impact, and every charity has sort of a slightly different model in terms of the work that they do and therefore the impact that they are having. You can read annual reports, you can get reports specifically designed for you to go from the charities to understand the kind of contribution that your support is making. But actually, what we found over time is that while all of those things can be great and sometimes really, really important and necessary, depending on sort of the size of your gift, there are ways to ask really, really simple questions that will allow you to understand the impact of the donations that you're having. And so even some of the clients that I'm working with that are giving away significant sums of money, we still look at just 3 simple questions to ask charities to understand how they're doing. And those 3 questions are something along the lines of, actually, how are we going against goals? what's happened in the last 6 or 12 months, what are you proud of? Really to get an understanding of what the charities see as their progress. The second question we ask, and this is always my favourite question, the second question we ask is, what's gone wrong and what have you learned from it, or how are you implementing? And I think that question is really, really important for two factors. The first one is that actually social change isn't linear. It doesn't always happen the way we expect it, with all the greatest plans in the world and programs and impact and, you know, measurement and all of those kind of things. People are people, and particularly people who are experiencing significant difficulties and have multiple challenges don't necessarily follow a nice linear path. So the reality is that things will go wrong. And what you really want from a charity is someone that can learn and adapt and adjust and continue the work despite these challenges, or, you know, as alongside these challenges. The other reason it's a really good question is that it kind of breaks down a little bit of the power imbalance that exists. As a funder, you essentially hold the power. You know, you have the greatest resource that charities need in order to continue their work. And to be able to say to them, actually, we get it. We understand that things can go wrong. We understand that it's not always going to go to plan. We're here with you. We're here to support you regardless of that, can be a really powerful way to connect and to actually be able to and allow them to have that continued impact. And then the other question that we ask is, actually, what else can we do to help? And that might be introduce them to someone. It might be nothing. It might be, you know, review a fundraising document that they have, or contribute to an event, or share your story in a newsletter. There's lots of different ways charities might be looking for support. And if you have the time and the capacity and the resources to do that, providing that as an offer can be really beneficial, again, for you in terms of your connection and your joy, but also for the charities in terms of their impact. So Michael and Georgina, who are pictured here, set up their Wild Country Environment Fund in the APS Foundation a couple of years ago. And I think their approach to impact is a really great one. They've established relationships with charities. They've done their due diligence up front. They get charities and they support charities that they know and that they trust and that they believe are doing great work. And then they literally give the funds, and Michael will say, we just get out of the way. So they understand their impact through seeing the work and experiencing it, connecting with it, but they don't try and dictate to the charities what they should be doing or where they should be working, because they've done the work up front to understand the impact of the charities, to understand the work that they're doing, and they believe in it and they connect it with it. So it's a really great way for them to see, and, you know, I've seen them get really excited about charities who've been nominated, charity partners they have who've been nominated for awards for doing something really innovative. They've also had the opportunity to fund really creative and innovative things, because instead of directing their money to what they think is important, they're listening to the charities, and the charities are coming to them and trusting them and saying, hey, we really think this could be a game changer. Would you be willing to fund that? And it's a really great relationship for them, and they're having that impact that they can now understand. And it kind of flows through in terms of actually they've set it up, they've done their work, and now they can support the charities and really feel like they're connecting with the impact that their funds are making. And the last thing, I just want to leave you with a quote, because I think sometimes in the day-to-day of anything that we do and the day-to-day of giving, you can get disconnected. One of the really fabulous things about giving is that, and there's some scientific research that shows that the impact on your brain and your mental health of giving is actually bigger than the impact you get from receiving a gift, which is just so fabulous. So there's a great quote that is from Adam and Belinda Kerr, two of our giving fund holders, who said that the joy that we get from funding something worthwhile that may not otherwise have happened is very powerful. And if you speak to Adam and Belinda and, you know, we ask them what's the advice you give to your former selves, their response was start giving earlier. So it's a really, really powerful thing. And I think it's always important to just reflect and to sit on the joy, because that's what we're all here for.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kate. We do have some great questions coming through. We've just got a couple of minutes to be able to answer those ones for you. So one of the questions that we have from Esther is just around the investment side for the APS Foundation. So I'll just quickly recap that. When you make your donation into the fund, the money is then sitting there waiting for you to recommend which charities you would like to distribute funds to the balance. Distribute the balance. While you're thinking about who you want to support, the APS Foundation trustee invests the money in your balance. Now, it is a pooled philanthropic structure. So we have almost 700 individual giving funds. We pool that total balance together, which is about $400 million or almost $400 million, and we invest that money for growth. When we get investment returns, that might be interest, dividends, or whatever the return is every month, we then credit back to your account your fund's proportionate share of those investment returns. So yes, the balance of the APS Foundation and your giving fund in it is invested for growth, and you will then get a share of those investment returns into the balance of your giving fund. So ideally, with good investment returns, as we've seen in that example, whilst you're giving money away, we're also growing the balance of your fund as those tax-free investment returns are credited back to your account. On investment or on fees generally, so the fee for a giving fund in the APS Foundation, there's two elements to it. One is the fee that APS charges to help the trustee administer the fund. So that covers everything. The support from Kate and her excellent team, the governance, the compliance, the administration, the portfolio managers, the investment oversight, and that's 1.025%. There is sometimes an additional fee charged by our underlying investment managers. So with the foundation, we've got our two portfolio managers, Chris and David, and then they hand select the top investment managers in Australia to manage a portion of the fund's balance. And most of those investment managers do it for free. So that means that not only are we getting great returns from the best investment managers, the fees are also being rebated into the fund, which means more money going to the community. Not all of them do it for free. We don't choose our investment managers based on who's going to do it for free. We choose the investment managers who fit the investment strategy of the fund and who we think is going to get the return that we're aiming for. There is some investment managers who charge, and the fee for that is calculated every year and disclosed every year. It's usually around 0.034. So those fees, 1.025, 0.034, is deducted from the balance of your fund monthly on a pro rata basis. Our investment returns, which are great, are always quoted after fees. So I would encourage anyone who is looking at the investment returns of any other providers, ask good questions around fees. What are all the fees? Are there any hidden fees? And also, are there investment returns quoted after fees? So I hope that one answers it for you, Esther. The other question that I had was donations going into the fund. If it's set up, a fund is set up jointly, so it might be a husband and wife who set up the fund. They can both be what we call our giving fund holders, so they can recommend gifts from the balance of the fund. They're essentially our account holders, the authority on the account, but anyone can donate into it. So it might be that the wife makes sense for her to make the donation into the fund to get the tax deduction. She can do that, but they can both be giving fund holders recommending gifts from the balance of the fund. So anyone can make a donation into the fund. It just doesn't necessarily have to be joint donations. You will make contributions into the fund based on what makes good tax sense, probably, from the perspective of the individual donors. The other question that we received is, can you port your balance of your fund from another provider? So if you have a giving fund with another public ancillary fund, yes, you can. Often it depends on the other provider whether they allow you to port out, but most of the other public ancillary funds do, and we support many people transferring their balance into the APS Foundation. There are a few other little bits and pieces and questions there that we haven't got time to get to today, but please rest assured that I will get in touch with you directly. If you have any other questions, please get in touch. And I will say that we have really great resources on our website, so I would encourage you to take a look there, but also contact us. We are where you are. So whether it's in Perth or Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, we have offices in all of those locations, but we do support donors and givers Australia-wide. So you can contact us. The email address is there, or phone number, and we would be delighted to answer any questions that you have. Thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to talk with you again soon. Thank you. Bye for now.